I recently did a trailer breakdown for Final Destination Bloodlines, and as usual, after watching it again and again, there's a few things that I'd noticed after doing the trailer breakdown, and there's a few things that you guys mentioned as well in the trailer breakdown comment section. So, this is what we've missed. The first one that a few of you guys mentioned to me, and I didn't even notice this, was the beer Heist Pale Ale. I didn't know this, but that's apparently the beer that's used in previous Final Destination movies. Not something that's going to blow your mind, but it's a nice little tidbit. So I think a massive talking point has become Eric. I think his name's Eric from this trailer because he was the guy who featured in the first teaser trailer where he looks like he burned to death in the tattoo parlor. And it looks like this scene here takes place after the tattoo parlor. And that's something that I mentioned in the previous video on my trailer breakdown because he's wearing the tattoo patch of what's probably the tattoo of his dad, as in DAD. So this takes place after the events of the tattoo parlor. So how did he survive the events of the tattoo parlor? Well, it could be a premonition. Someone's had a premonition, and when someone has a premonition, it's usually the person that is dying that has that premonition. So it's possible that he is the one that's had that premonition, not the girl, the main girl, because I feel like from the previous times, you have to be there to have that premonition. So whether or not she's there, I don't know. But if he's the one that's had the premonition and he's woken up, then surely he kind of believes what's happening to everybody around him. But if it wasn't a premonition and he's just so lucky and he survives that, how does he keep surviving? Now, I know that you say, well, death has a time for you, so maybe it just wasn't his time. And if it wasn't his time, then death wouldn't have done all those things in the tattoo shop for him to survive. So it seems like it was supposed to be his time, but why didn't they die? Now, there's something that's been going on in my mind with this t-shirt that he's got on the fire department. It could be that maybe one of his family members, maybe his dad used to be in the fire department, and maybe his dad was in the fire department, and maybe his dad, as in this boy's grandfather, was one of the first responders that went to the tower that collapsed in the late 60s or the 70s with that premonition that Iris had. So it's possible that that's the connection there. Or he's got this fire department t-shirt because he was given that, because he survived the fire in the tattoo shop, and he's just wearing it as a reminder that he's a very lucky boy. And of course, we already established that he didn't get hit by a vehicle at the end of this trailer. The vehicle passed him, but it doesn't mean he doesn't die in this scene. In true Final Destination fashion, maybe the vehicle passes him and he says something like, see, I told you, I'm very lucky, and then he gets hit by something else. So never say never, never say that he doesn't die, but in that trailer there and in the previous teaser trailer, he definitely doesn't die. Why doesn't he die? Well, again, maybe it just isn't his time and death is playing with him. Or, like I said previously, maybe he is adopted. It does sound funny and it does sound silly, but that could be it. Because this is a Bloodlines story and all the Bloodlines are in trouble, then there is a potential for a little mini twist being there that one of the family members isn't related to any of them, therefore they're not at risk. However, that would get all turned on its head with that barbecue scene. Now, here's where we put a spanner in the works. With the barbecue scene, you can see Eric is standing at the barbecue and it goes up in flames a little bit. It's almost like a premonition, a mini premonition that he's going to die by fire. Or it could be that barbecue is warning him to stay away from fire because that is how he could potentially die. What I'm thinking though is at this barbecue scene, everybody in this scene is supposed to die. And what I mean by that is everybody could die in a premonition that the main girl is having. She could turn up to the barbecue after having the premonition. She gets there, warns everybody. Everybody survives apart from Howard, the father, and maybe he's the only one that dies. And then everybody at this barbecue survives, and now they're on death's list. But the problem with that is they might have already been on death's list because Howard wasn't supposed to be alive in the first place because one of his parents, possibly Iris, survived the tower collapse. And because she survived the tower collapse, Howard wasn't supposed to be born. And because he wasn't supposed to be born, his children weren't supposed to be born either. So that's where the bloodline comes into it. I mentioned on social media that this storyline for Final Destination feels an awful lot like It Follows. In It Follows, if you have sex with someone, then you pass the curse on. If that person has sex with someone, they pass it on and so on and so on. And if that person gets killed by the curse, it goes back to the next person and so on until it's back to you again. And it's very similar to the storyline for Bloodlines because it seems like if you have a child and that person has a child, death maybe comes after them. And if they die, it goes back to you, then goes back to the mother, then the grandmother, etc., etc. If it's not identical, it's very similar. Another thing I think we missed, which is still kind of speculation, is the main girl has a brother, has a dad, and I think the dad's wife is the sister of Howard, who was the guy who died by the lawnmower. So I think that's how they're all related. Don't know how I never noticed that to begin with. However, that's not confirmed. That's just what I think. When it comes to this scene here, unfortunately, I can't zoom in and see a lot of what it says or all the people's names. But if you zoom into this, I'm assuming that you might see some names that you recognize. I'm not saying there is. I'm just saying there might very well be. I know that this is a timeline of their family, but it could also be extended family that we might eventually see. And I believe that this extended family, some of these people are going to be connected to the events of the deaths of the previous Final Destination movies. So what I'm trying to say is, and this is quite convoluted, is this death pattern began with the grandmother Iris in possibly the late 60s, the early 70s, whenever it was. And that caused a ripple effect with all the survivors. And I feel like, I don't think all the survivors or the people involved in the previous films will be related to Iris, but I think Iris surviving this, we'll see the effects of her family in this Bloodlines movie, but everybody else that she saves that day, let's assume she manages to convince 5 or 6 people to leave that building that day. That means not only her bloodline is going to be affected, but their bloodline will be affected as well. And I've got a funny feeling that this is an example. I've got a funny feeling that one of the survivors is going to be called Browning. And then that's going to go back to Alex Browning from the first Final Destination movie. And we might see a flashback of that person because they survived and had a child and they had a child, etc. Then I feel like they're going to have a big connection to the previous films. And if they didn't survive the tower, then Final Destination 1 wouldn't exist. And if the other person didn't survive because of Iris, then the events of Final Destination 2 wouldn't have happened because death is coming after them because of that one scene back in the late 60s, the early 70s. It's all very confusing, I know, guys, but I feel like that's definitely going to be the case. I think there's more than meets the eye with this survival at the tower. I think the tower is going to be involved with the survivors of all the previous Final Destination movies, and they're all going to be linked because of that. So what are your thoughts on that, guys? Is there anything else that I've missed in this trailer? I feel like Eric is the biggest connection, as well as obviously the Bloodlines part of it as well. But what do you guys think? Do you believe what I'm saying? Do you think that's going to be the case with regards to Eric, with regards to the previous Final Destination movies all being linked? And is there anything else that I've missed? As always, guys, leave your comments and opinions down below. Let me know what you think, and I'll talk to you soon.
Meeting adjourned.
I'll be right back.
What are you waiting for, huh?
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever played in the cat?
Someone's in the